Hello, my name is Mike Ryan. The name of the show is Jury Duty. You Make a Difference on BNN. Hopefully the show that'll answer all your questions about the one-day, one-trial jury system. Our guests today are Judge William G. Young from the federal court and Jim McAlear, the federal jury administrator. Welcome, Judge.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for being on the show. Judge Young is a graduate of Harvard College and of Harvard Law School. Served as an officer in the United States Army, began his legal career at Dana, Bingham & Gould, and went on to become Special Assistant Attorney General and Chief Counsel for the former Governor Francis Sargent. You were appointed to the Superior Court bench in 1977, and then later appointed to the United States bench in 1985, and have served there since. And you have taught courses on evidence and trial advocacy at several law schools, and have written extensively on the law, several books. And Jim McAlear has worked for the federal courts for the past 17 and a half years. The last 15 as the federal jury administrator, and before that, worked for the Office of Jury Commissioner. So today we'd like to talk about jury duty at the federal court in Boston. And Jim, let's start with you. How long is federal jury duty?
Federal jury duty is 3 weeks long. Jurors are on call. They call in the night before. They're required to report, and they're told whether or not to come in, if they have to come in. It turns into something like the state court, which is a one-day, one trial. Jurors are either selected that day and will have to serve the duration of that trial, or they're excused from any further service. Those jurors that are not required to come in, they call back the following Friday to see if they have to report the Monday after that, and that process repeats for 3 weeks.
So they're on call sort of for three weeks?
That's correct.
And people in Boston, do they go, is it just people in the Boston area who go to the federal courthouse in South Boston?
No, we actually cover a very broad area, much broader than our counterparts over at the state court. The federal court in Boston covers all of eastern Massachusetts, from the border of New Hampshire all the way down to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. So it's everything east of Worcester County. We have two other courts that handle federal jury duty. One is in Worcester, which covers all of Worcester County, and the other is in Springfield, which covers the western part of the state.
So if I live in the Cape, I have to come to Boston. If I live up near New Hampshire, I have to come to Boston.
Yes, you do.
Any travel tips?
Leave early. Give yourself extra time. Don't think you can just hop on the highway and get right in. Those jurors that are coming over on the T that live in the Boston area, just give yourself a little extra time, as the travel conditions are always changing over in the ever-changing South Boston area.
What time is check-in for the jurors?
Check-in begins at 8 o'clock. We request everybody to be there by 8:30.
Okay, Your Honor, you've worked in the state courts and in the federal courts. Is there any difference in the jury trials between state and federal?
Well, there's differences in the jurisdiction of the courts, but really a trial is a very basic American experience. And the actual trial that the jury experiences is not going to be much different at all. We, in all so-called criminal cases, just like the state courts, require unanimous verdicts on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The one difference in the state court, in a civil case, a verdict can be received with 10 out of 12 agreeing, but in the federal courts, it has to be the traditional unanimous verdict.
Oh, unanimous on a civil?
On a civil, yes.
So what kind of cases would a juror possibly sit on at the U.S. District Court?
Our jurisdiction is as broad as Congress will permit. We are the basic trial court of the federal system. So our docket on the criminal side deals with alleged violations of any federal criminal statute. Interestingly, the Commonwealth, our Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has extensive criminal code dealing with drug violations. So does the federal court, and they tend to overlap. So criminal, there are alleged drug offenses. We specifically have immigration offenses that you wouldn't have in the state courts, and we have various federal securities law violations. Now, on the civil side, we have those civil claims that Congress has empowered the courts to deal with. So we have a broad array of civil rights violations. But of course, so does the state court, because we have very powerful anti-discrimination laws that are violations of state law. Some of the unique things that a juror might run across if you sit in federal court are patent cases. We are the only ones who deal with patent and trademark cases. But it's like two intersecting circles. The state courts have some cases that we do not. An arson case, for example, a burglary case. That wouldn't involve federal issues. And we have some that the states do not, like patent cases. But most involve the same types of dispute. Commercial disputes on the civil side. Civil rights is the largest part of our docket on the civil side.
Jim, is there a typical length that a trial would be in the federal court? Is that too hard to?
It's very hard to answer, as there's so many varying factors depending on what the case is about, what the hours the judge will sit. Typically, we have quite a few of our judges sit on jury trials between the hours of 9 and 1 and do other court business after the jurors leave. And some judges sit between the hours of 10 and 4 or 9 and 4. We like to say that civil trials usually tend to be 4 to 7 days. That doesn't mean we don't have our fair share of 1 and 2 day trials. Doesn't also mean we have our fair share of 6 and 8 week trials. About 4 to 7 days is, I guess, the basic number that we do use, but it can vary very much.
But if you're not selected on the day you report, then your service is completed.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
In the event where we have an extremely busy 3-week period, we may call jurors back. It is possible, but we try not to do that. We try to stick to the 1 day, 1 trial.
Your Honor, and what's the longest jury trial that you've presided over?
The longest, and I believe it's the longest in the history of the court, was 11 months. And we sat in Springfield, United States versus Lavasser. And we started with 18 jurors. 12 would deliberate, and we had 6 alternates, the maximum number of alternates. At the end of the trial, we still had 18 jurors. In those days, we used to sequester them, and we did sequester them in this case. And we sequestered them over Thanksgiving. At the end of 22 days of deliberation, they acquitted on 1 count, and it was a perfectly valid jury verdict, and then they hung on the other count. But the government did not want to try the case again. Most of the people who had been indicted were already in prison. That was the longest case.
What is the judge's role in a jury trial?
The judge in a jury trial is a teacher. The judge is the teacher of the law. That's the basic role of the trial judge, is fairly and impartially to teach the law to the jurors. The judge does not decide, does not comment on the evidence, on the data on which the jury will decide the case, because it is the jurors under our constitutional system. They are judges too. They're the judges of the facts. And how they unanimously come to view the facts, that settles the matter. No judge at whatever level it can review a jury verdict and say, no, they got it wrong. That's committed directly to the people under our United States Constitution. But what the judge does is teach the law. It teaches, this is what, in a criminal case, this is what the government has to prove. They've made this charge. They have to prove the charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And in a civil case, you'll usually say the plaintiff, the person who has brought the lawsuit. And we try to use the actual name of the person. We say, Mr. Smith, he's got to prove certain things. Now, here's what he's got to prove. But it's a fair preponderance of the evidence. And when I'm doing it, I actually extend my arms and I try to gesture to them fair preponderance of the evidence means more likely to be true than not true. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And anything we can do properly to teach the jury, that's what ensures justice, and make sure that the law is the same throughout all the cases. Judges teach it. The evidence is different in every case, and that is for the jury.
Are some cases too complex for jurors?
You'll understand I'm biased.
Okay.
Emphatically no.
Okay.
The jury system in the United States works. It's the most robust system of direct democracy that any country in the history of the world has ever used. De Tocqueville speaks of this stunning experiment in direct democracy. And there are some academics argue that some of these patent cases, some of these complex, long cases are too complex for the average person to understand. I think they have it dead wrong. The jury is direct democracy. It's the people. It's the people ruling directly. And it's up to the lawyers and the judge. It's up to the lawyers to explain, to teach through witnesses this aspect of human endeavor, and it's up to the judge to make understandable the laws that Congress has passed. That's the genius of our system. We're all part of it. We all have the right to know what the law is. In fact, that's one of the jurors' rights, to have the law explained to the jury absolutely accurately. And it's from that right that we have judicial independence of all the courts below the Supreme Court. Why do we say that a judge can declare an act of Congress unconstitutional? Well, who left it up to her? No one elected her. Why can she do that? There's only one reason. The reason is she has to teach the jury how the law actually works. You couldn't have a jury system if everything had to be referred to the Supreme Court in Washington and say, I'm not sure whether this is constitutional, why don't you tell me? And then once you've told me, we'll go on. The jury is the life's blood of our system. It is the concept of justice here in the United States. So, yes, you've touched a nerve there. Juries can handle every case, and it is the obligation of judges and lawyers to make sure they understand it.
Jim, what about when people come to court at the Moakley Courthouse? Can you describe what typically may happen during the course of their jury day?
As in most jury trials or jury duty around the state, or I'm sure around the country, a lot of waiting is involved.
Any tips about first-time jurors coming to the federal court?
Bring a book.
Bring a book. What about dress?
We have a relaxed dress code at the federal court. We request that people dress respectful because it is a courthouse, but we have no official dress code. We do ask jurors to come in at 8 a.m., as I said earlier, and we try to start right on time. We try to start right around 8:30 to 8:45, start with an orientation video, try to get everybody to relax a little bit and get ready to perform their civic duty. When we bring jurors in, we're generally ready to go to trial. State court, I find that when I go to the state court, it seems that they have a lot more trials, and they may bring in a panel for a number of trials that are going to start that day. And throughout the day, they'll start bringing jurors up to the various courtrooms. We bring in jurors, the number that we bring in are ready to go to court. So once the judge calls down and says we're ready, we have that jury upstairs hopefully by 9:30 is when the jurors are usually delivered to the courtroom. And it's a lot of hustle. Once jurors get going, we try to keep them moving as quickly as we can because we're trying to minimize the amount of time that a juror is there, and we try to make sure that they have hopefully received a satisfactory experience at the federal court.
I want to jump in here a little bit. There is waiting, and waiting primarily for jurors is on the first day. Mondays is when we usually impanel. And it's necessary because we have to sort out this larger group of people and get them into the different courtrooms of the judges who are commencing trials on that day. So Jim is absolutely right, though he and his team try very hard to keep that to a minimum. Once a judge calls for jurors, he'll do anything he can to get the requisite number of jurors into the courtroom. Now, once they've been picked, the normal day, if I have my way, is we start right at 9 o'clock, and I want all the jurors to be there. But if the jurors are there, and jurors will respond to this, then everything's ready to go. If they know the 12 jurors are going to walk out and walk into the jury box, then the witnesses are ready and the like. The way I work it is, I do sit 9 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. I do all my other work in the afternoon. I take a break during the morning so the jurors aren't sitting there for 4 hours. We bring them refreshments, time for a cup of coffee, and then I stop right at the dot of 1 because people have work to go to or other obligations. When they are deliberating, I say we want you for a full business day, 9 to 5, but it would be very rare to sit beyond 5 in the afternoon or to sit into a weekend.
Your Honor, do a lot of cases in the federal court settle just because of the presence of jurors being in the courthouse that day?
Yes. Nothing so concentrates the mind as the prospect of an actual trial. And that is as it should be. There's nothing the matter with settling. Settling gives the parties the chance to strike their own deal. And that's desirable. They can work it out. It may well be a compromise, but they can work it out. If jurors are there, if the people are there, jury is the New England town meeting writ large, they rapidly get the idea that these 12 people are going to decide it. And that appropriately causes settlement, and a juror who finds that the case on which they have been called has settled should not feel bad. They have made an enormous contribution by being ready to resolve it.
Jim, how are jurors selected for the federal court?
Same way the state court is. We actually use the town and city residence list.
So not the voting list?
Not the voting list.
Okay.
No, and even though our video will tell the jurors, because the same video that gets shown in Massachusetts gets shown in California and in Idaho, and some of those states still use a registered voter list, where we in Massachusetts use the town and city census list, or
Sure.
residence list is what it's commonly known as.
So,
from your office, and we are very grateful for that cooperation. That's but for Alaska, and Alaska has a specific reason because they give a dividend check each year from their oil revenues. But for Alaska, Massachusetts has the best, and I mean the Commonwealth, the state, has the best jury lists in the United States.
I'm going to write that down.
I'd tell
that's very
anyone
good.
that. They're the best jury lists, and they are shared with us, and we choose at random, coincident with the population, because that's another juror right. Everyone has a right equal with every other citizen to sit on a jury. As an affirmative thing, that's the citizen's right. One of their 4 major rights is to sit on the nation's juries. So as Jim said, for instance, 11 of us sit in Boston, 1 in Worcester, 1 in Springfield, the judges. Well, our judge in Springfield, he took what's called senior status, which meant he tried fewer cases. Well, you could say, in a state our size, that those people have to come to Boston. That, after all, is where the judge is. That's not how our court worked it out. We said, no, we judges have to go to Springfield. The reason? If we make everyone come to Boston, what about the people who live in the 4 western counties? How are they going to get their right? And it is a right to serve on the nation's jurors.
So people can be called for state jury duty and federal jury duty, and our office will accept 1 day of federal jury service. But for the federal, if you get both summonses, what would you say?
We would say we trump state court jury service, and if you did request to be excused because you served state court jury duty, you would have to have served 5 days or more on a trial within the last 3 years.
Okay, so it is possible some people have done federal and state jury duty, say, within a year.
Absolutely. Some have got summonsed for the same day, but only have to serve federal jury duty if they get summonsed for the same day.
Are there, Judge Young mentioned about bringing coffee. Are there any amenities for people who come to the Moakley Courthouse for jury?
Yes. In the morning, when jurors report, we have coffee, juice, and soda that's available for the jurors. And that's for jurors to come in the morning. And then, as Judge said, if a juror is selected, we do have light refreshments for them at a morning break.
They have Wi-Fi?
Jurors are not allowed to bring in their cell phone or laptop into the federal court.
Okay, so there's no issues with social media from jurors and at the federal level that you know of?
Not while they're sitting there, no. But it is definitely a concern with the amount of social media that is out there. It's definitely a concern for sitting jurors.
That's now added into our instructions. We instruct them not to talk about the case and make a specific point of social media. And the reason is an obvious reason. Once they are selected as a juror, they're a constitutional officer, just like the judge. They're one of 12 who are going to decide a particular case. And once the case is over, they can say anything they want. But while it's going on, they are to focus on the evidence in that specific case and not talk to anyone, not because it's secret, but because they have a special role. I tell people, if you go and tell people about the case you're on, they're going to tell you what they think about it. But they're not sworn. They weren't chosen. They don't have the responsibility. And so we try to make that emphatic. And my experience has been Americans have an extraordinarily strong sense of duty. Jurors do their duty. There isn't runaway jurors. The sympathy does not sway jurors. They pay attention to the evidence, and they make extraordinarily difficult choices, and they make them with a common sense decency that is inspiring, and it's inspiring every single week.
Jim, can someone postpone their juror service?
We do give postponements on a case-by-case basis. It's not like the state where you can automatically receive a postponement. We would request the juror submit in writing the reason why they need to be postponed. We are liberal with our postponements. However, we do have to worry about the needs of the court and make sure we have sufficient number of jurors to continue on with our business. But we do give deferments, again, on a case-by-case basis.
Judge Young, you recently fined a juror for not showing up for jury duty, and as your discussion already, feel very strongly about jury duty. What kind of a role do jurors play in the federal court system?
They're the life's blood of the system. The system emphatically could not operate without jurors. Something I say in every case, civil or criminal. I was taught back when I was a state judge, a superior court justice, I was taught to go back and thank the jurors for their service, not ask them questions, but thank them for their service. And I do that in every single case. If the case settles while it's going on, I thank them. So I always go back and I thank them. And one of the things I say, if you ever wonder what justice is in the United States, look around this room. And these, of course, are the other 11 people that they've just been deliberating with. And I say, that's what justice is. And that's right. That's what justice is. Those 12 people, and the 12 people we'll have in that follow them, and the 12 people that were in that room before they went in to sit down. That's what justice is.
Well, we've run out of time. We'd like to thank you for joining us today on Jury Duty and Make a Difference on BNN. Just remember, if you have any questions about your federal jury duty in Boston, you can call 617-748-9082 and also on the web at mad.uscourts.gov. You do make a difference when you come to jury duty. Please serve when called for either state or federal jury duty. It's important to all of us. Thank you, Judge Young.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And
thank you
at home.